and create the solutions both on a social and economic objective. One of the other trends we're seeing is where businesses are aligning with their social and environmental impact in addition to their, of course, financial impact as being one and the same in terms of stakeholder returns. So that, I think, is a positive trend we have to nurture.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Hello everyone, I'm Michael Holmes. Appreciate your company. Coming up here on CNN Newsroom, hours before the Ukraine Recovery Conference begins in Switzerland, a major setback on the battlefield as Ukrainian troops are forced to pull out of a key city in the east. A terrifying scene at a mall in Denmark. A gunman opens fire, killing 3 and sending shoppers running for the exits. And thousands told to evacuate in Sydney, Australia, as heavy rains caused flash flooding in parts of the city. Emergency crews calling the situation threatening.
Live from CNN Centre, this is CNN Newsroom with Michael Holmes.
And we begin in Ukraine, where officials are already turning an eye towards rebuilding, even as their troops suffer a major setback on the battlefield. In the hours ahead, Ukrainian officials will arrive in Switzerland for talks about how to rebuild the country once the fighting ends. We've also learned that the UK plans to unveil a major aid package during the conference. It includes more than $1.5 billion in loans and other funding. Ukraine has estimated it will cost at least $600 billion to rebuild after the war. Others put the potential bill much higher than that. This all coming as Ukraine suffers a critical loss in the east. On Sunday, Ukraine's military said it was forced to withdraw from the city of Lysychansk, a key target in Russia's push to control the Donbass. The loss likely means Russian forces now effectively control the entire Luhansk region and can shift their focus to advancing in neighbouring Donetsk. And already the cities there are under increased attack. In Sloviansk, Ukrainian officials say at least 6 were killed, 15 wounded, amid some of the heaviest shelling in recent days. In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia has built up massive firepower in the Donbass. Still, he vowed Ukraine's military will retake the territory they've lost.
Ukraine does not give anything up, and when someone over there in Moscow reports something about the Luhansk region, let them remember their reports and promises before February 24th. In the first days of this invasion, in the spring and now, let them really evaluate what they got over this time and how much they paid for it. Because their current reports will turn into dust as the previous ones. We are gradually moving forward in the Kharkiv region, in the Kherson region, and at sea. Zmyny is a good example of this. There will be a day when we will say the same about Donbass.
CNN's Scott McLean has a closer look now at why Ukrainian troops decided to withdraw from Lysychansk and what they need to continue fighting.
The Russians now say that they are fully in control of the Luhansk region. They say that they have managed to capture the last major city in the region, Lysychansk. Beyond that, there are only a few minor settlements to the west and then the administrative border or boundary, which they say that they've reached. But they're not stopping there. There have been reports of heavy shelling in the city of Sloviansk to the west in the Donetsk region and missile strikes in Kramatorsk nearby as well. The Ukrainians have conceded that their troops have in fact been pulled back. They said that they could have kept fighting, but in order to preserve the lives of their soldiers and preserve their manpower on the front line, they made the decision to withdraw. They say they were simply outgunned and they were outmanned, saying steel will and patriotism are not enough for success. Material and technical resources are needed. Now, the Ukrainians, of course, since the outset of the war and even before, have been calling for more heavy weapons to be sent from their Western partners. And while plenty have already been sent and plenty more have been pledged, the Ukrainians say that they're not reaching the front lines quickly enough. The Russians also say that Very early this morning, there were a series of missile strikes inside of Russian territory in residential areas that they are blaming on the Ukrainians, saying that they are deliberately targeting civilian areas and that there are no military targets in that particular area. They say that a series of missiles were shot down by air defense systems and then the remnants landed in this residential area. Now, there have been plenty of explosions reported across the Belgorod region of Russia and other parts of the country in recent months, but the Ukrainians have never officially taken responsibility for them, nor are they doing that today. An advisor to the president did not directly claim any kind of responsibility, but he did say evil has consequences and you always have to pay the bills. Scott McLean, CNN, Kyiv.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, in the hours ahead, talks will get underway in Switzerland about how to rebuild Ukraine after the devastation of this war. But even once the fighting does stop, Ukraine will face an uphill battle towards recovery. Officials estimate reconstruction will cost hundreds of billions of dollars, could even run into the trillions. In his nightly address on Saturday, Ukraine's president called it, quote, the largest economic project of our time, one that will require colossal investment. Joining me now from Washington is Brian Kavanagh. He's the Senior Vice President for American Global Strategies. Thanks for making the time, Brian. So just how monumental of a task will rebuilding be? I mean, it must be hard to know where to begin once it's even possible to begin.
Well, thank you so much for having me this morning, Michael. And I would certainly agree with you. This is a monumental task. I think it's going to be the greatest recovery effort of our generation. Not since World War II have we seen something on this magnitude. The scope and scale of devastation in Ukraine is truly, in a modern sense, unlike anything we've dealt with before.
How difficult is it to contemplate reconstruction when more of the country is being destroyed every day, or is that precisely the time to be doing it, planning ahead?
Well, see, I think this presents a great opportunity. If taking the opportunity to plan right now while the conflict is ongoing is going to enable you to have the most efficient recovery and rebuild possible. I think when you look at it in terms of what could be happening right now, there could be agreement from an international community on the framework of what is it we are going to do, what's the boundaries, the left and right guidelines of how we're going to approach this recovery in Ukraine. Ukraine can take the opportunity to figure out how they want to set up the governance mechanisms to oversee and ensure the investment of what's going to be billions of dollars is spent to make sure that Ukraine has a strong and prosperous future while not falling victim to its past with corruption and some of the other things that they've had a track record with.
Yeah, indeed. How much does Ukraine's eventual European Union membership play into the overall reconstruction strategy in terms of the European economy and what Ukraine can offer the Union in areas like agriculture and renewables and technology sectors and all of that? Does that play into the consideration of the plan?
Absolutely. I think what you have here, Ukraine represents tremendous agricultural investment. It's the breadbasket of Europe. It's sitting on some of the largest deposits of rare earth minerals in the entire continent. And then couple that with its budding tech sector, I think what you have here is a real opportunity for the EU to assess what Ukraine brings to the table, while simultaneously Ukraine can improve on its track record and prove that it's built some of the mechanisms necessary for good governance, avoiding the corruption, and kind of keeping the oligarchs in check. It's something that they struggled with during the revolution of dignity in 2014.
Yeah, and you mentioned World War II. In a historical sense, I mean, the devastation and destruction done to Ukraine is reminiscent of post-World War II Europe. And I guess it's worth remembering that it wasn't until 3 years after the end of the war that the US established what became known as the Marshall Plan for rebuilding. Would Ukraine plan need to be speedier in terms of preparation and implementation?
Well, I think this is an opportunity to look back and take lessons of best practices and apply them in a real-time context. When you look back at World War II, it wasn't until we were there on the brink of starvation in the post-conflict era before the Marshall Plan really solidified and gained support. And I think, in fact, Secretary Marshall was giving a speech at a university, and that's what kind of garnered the traction 2.5 years into recovery. If you're looking at this from a sense of we live in a world where every day you wait to put something off, exponentially the challenges grow for you. I think you look at it in terms of like, what do they need to do to get Ukraine back quickly? Some of these things can be planned for today. You're talking about unexploded ordnance removal, and you're talking about reestablishing some supply chains, critical transportation infrastructure, and putting them on taking them from a post-World War II Soviet era system and springboarding them into a modern global economy in terms of the infrastructure and in terms of how they set up the threat of that society.
Yeah, using it as an opportunity in many ways. I mean, there's something like, I think, $350 billion in frozen reserves from Russia's central bank, more than $30 billion in assets seized from Russian oligarchs. Will or should those funds be used to help pay part of the bill? And it's going to be a big bill.
Yeah, I think in some estimates you've seen anywhere from $250 billion to $1 trillion as projected estimates here. And I think not exploring the frozen assets and the seized assets of Russia and the Russian central bank is a complete miss. I don't think any country is well postured in the current economic challenges to bolster this recovery and rebuild on their own. I think some countries are better suited with their laws to take advantage of some of the frozen assets, while some countries like the United States might need to go to Congress and revisit legislation in order to take advantage of some of the funds that they've frozen from the Russian central bank. I certainly think that is something that calls for further exploration and would help reduce the risk investment for a lot of the international community as they approach this tremendous effort.
Yeah. Fascinating analysis. Brian Kavanagh, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Michael. I hope you guys have a great day.
Now, the suspect accused of a mass shooting at a mall in Copenhagen, Denmark, will face questioning from a judge on Monday. Police say at least 3 people were killed, including a man in his 40s and 2 younger people as well. Several others injured, including 3 in critical condition. CNN's Nada Bashir is in London with more details.
Well, the investigation is still very much ongoing, and we are still learning more information about this incident hour by hour. At this stage, police have confirmed that 1 individual has been arrested. A 22-year-old Danish man was identified, and police have said that there was no indication that other shooters were involved, but they haven't been able to formally rule out the possibility of further suspects just yet. But of course, they have confirmed that tragic news that there are several fatalities reported, and at least 3 people have been hospitalized so far, but police have yet to provide any further details on their current condition. That said, the hospital where these 3 individuals were taken has said that extra staff were called in to deal with the emergency situation. The incident, of course, took place during a busy Sunday afternoon at Copenhagen's Fields Mall, a popular shopping centre in the city and an area that is very close to one of the city's largest concert venues, where pop star Harry Styles had been due to perform. For now, police say they are maintaining a heavy presence at the scene as their investigation continues. But the key question remains, what was the motive behind this incident? That is still unclear, although police officials have said that they cannot rule out the possibility that this may have been terror-related. However, I have to stress that the motive is still very much unclear and the investigation remains ongoing. Nada Bashir, CNN, London.
The city of Akron, Ohio is on edge after police released a disturbing body cam video showing the fatal police shooting of a 25-year-old unarmed black man. Akron's police chief says Jalen Walker suffered at least 60 gunshot wounds, citing a medical examiner's report. Now, the release of this information coming nearly a week after officers tried to stop Walker for an alleged traffic violation. Police say he led them on a car chase. They also claim he fired a shot at them. Here's some of the body cam footage released by Akron police.
21 shots fired. That vehicle just had a shot come out of its door.
Police say Walker eventually abandoned his car and a foot pursuit took place. Now, during this chase, Officers believe that Walker was reaching towards his waist and moving into a firing position. He did not, however, have a weapon. We do want to warn you, this next piece of video we're going to show you is very disturbing. It is from the night of the shooting. That sound at the end of that video there, that cacophony, were shots being fired, dozens of them, some estimates up to 90 shots. Officers later did discover that Walker had left his gun in the car. He was unarmed when he was shot. Here's the Akron police chief.
What was going to be a routine traffic stop, which would probably result either in a warning or a citation being issued, turned into a pursuit. As Mr. Walker turned onto the entrance ramp to Route 8 and the shot is fired, that changes the nature of the contact. 40 seconds after the initiation of the traffic stop, a half a mile from the location of the traffic stop, you hear the gunshot and then everything else that I've just discovered. And again, that changes the whole nature of the traffic stop. It went from being a routine traffic stop to now a public safety issue.
Right now, 8 officers are on paid administrative leave. The Akron Police Union believes the officers involved in the shooting were justified in their actions, and they say that each officer is, quote, cooperating fully with the independent investigation. Meanwhile, an attorney for Walker's family says Jayland had never broken the law during his life, no crimes of any kind. The family wants more answers from the police. They also want the public to give peace, give dignity, and give justice a chance for Jayland. Now, while we wait for more information surrounding the shooting, law enforcement expert Cheryl Dorsey is among those raising concerns about Akron's handling of the case.
Well, certainly the number in totality seems extreme, 60 shots, but we know that there were several officers who were pursuing Mr. Walker on foot. The question that begs to be asked and answered is, how many rounds did each individual officer fire? And so they're going to have to speak to that. They're going to have to articulate what was the perception of threat and why was it necessary to fire however many rounds each officer fired. And so while we hear the police chief say that this could have potentially been a routine traffic stop, you understand an armed suspect wearing a ski mask is far from routine for officers who are conducting a traffic stop.
CNN will continue to follow this story and bring you any updates as they become available. The US is now directly involved with the investigation into the death of Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh. The Al Jazeera reporter was covering an Israeli military raid in the occupied West Bank in May when she was killed by gunfire. The US government had been urging the Palestinians for weeks to turn over the bullet that killed her. CNN's Hadas Gold with the latest from Jerusalem.
Nearly 2 months after Al Jazeera correspondent Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, we may be getting closer to an answer as to who fired the fatal shot. Over the weekend, the Palestinian Authority handed the bullet that killed Abu Akleh over to the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Although the Palestinian Authority Attorney General said they had been given many guarantees by the Americans that the bullet would not be given to the Israelis, a spokesperson for the Israel Defense Forces said they were going to work with the Americans to conduct a forensic investigation. The Palestinian Authority has denied requests to hold a joint investigation with the Israelis, saying they can't trust the Israelis. The IDF said the bullet is in the hands of a senior American general who will be present throughout the entire duration of the investigation. The IDF spokesperson said that the results should be released soon, and that if the investigation showed that an Israeli soldier killed Abu Akleh, they will, quote, take responsibility and will be apologetic. Spokespeople for the Palestinian Authority did not respond to requests for comments about the IDF involvement in the bullets examination. Several investigations by news organizations, including CNN, as well as by the United Nations Human Rights Office, have found that it is most likely that Abu Akleh was killed by Israeli fire and not by gunfire from Palestinian militants, as then Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett initially suggested. The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem has thus far declined to comment. Hadass Gold, CNN, Jerusalem.
Medics in Sudan say last week's deadly anti-coup protests resulted in the most injuries since the military seized power last October. The Sudanese Doctors Committee reports at least 9 people killed. Nearly 630 were injured during Thursday's demonstrations. They took place in a number of cities, including the capital, Khartoum. The committee says dozens of the injuries were caused by live bullets, tear gas. Some protesters were hit by vehicles belonging to military forces. Pro-democracy groups say they will continue to organise protests against the military takeover. Quick break here on the program. When we come back, a Hong Kong lawmaker tests positive for COVID-19 after attending a photo op with Xi Jinping. How the case broke through the Chinese president's strict precautions and protocol, we'll discuss when we come back. Also, we'll bring you the latest on that ship which sank in the South China Sea on Saturday as the search resumes for survivors.
My name is Ben Smith, CEO of Air France-KLM. From the airline perspective, we were quite confident that the summer would be good. So from a pilot, cabin crew, maintenance, we were ready. But we've seen in some airports that there have been shortages at security, shortages at customs and immigration. So the impact that it has on us is quite large. We've tried to spread out our departures, which costs us money. And then the minimum connection times at both of our hubs, we've expanded them, which here again, it costs us money as well, but at least it takes pressure off people connecting, it takes stress away, it takes some stress off our employees as well when we don't have the same number of flights all going at the same time.
We share this place, we all belong.
Heard it all before? But have you heard it like this?
The ultimate disruptor looks set to shake up our world. We really can't ignore the impact that this has. What can we do that explores a fresh angle? So let's untangle the players and political forces. The truth is a lot more complex. What's really going on?
Fast-paced news, in-depth reports, and fact checks from the perspective of The Global Brief with Bianca Nobilo. Tonight on CNN.
A Hong Kong lawmaker photographed near the Chinese President Xi Jinping has tested positive for COVID-19. President Xi visited the city last week during the 25th anniversary of Hong Kong's handover from Britain to China. It was his first trip outside the mainland since the start of the pandemic. He joined lawmakers for photographs commemorating the event, as you can see there. The person who tested positive says his test was negative on Thursday when those photographs were taken. CNN senior international correspondent Will Ripley joins me now from Taipei with more. And Will, just sort of fill us in. How much risk was the president at?
Well, they were only standing together, presumably for a period of minutes at most. But this lawmaker from Hong Kong, Steve Ho Chun Yin, was just one row behind President Xi, who, by the way, was making his first trip outside of mainland China in more than 2 years to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong handover from British rule to Beijing rule. And President Xi, as we heard, proclaimed his rule over the Chinese territory and, intimated that life is going to change there. But the closed loop that surrounds President Xi is supposed to be hermetically sealed. You had hundreds of people, preparing for weeks to get this right in Hong Kong. You're talking about daily COVID testing, a private car from home to work and no other travel permitted, daily testing, a quarantine hotel for everybody who was going to be near the president the night before meeting him. And yet, even with all of that, the virus still got in, and it got close to President Xi, which really underscores, Michael, the reality that scientists around the world pretty much agree on, that with Omicron and high vaccination rates, it's just not sustainable to have a zero COVID policy. But because President Xi is so vehemently and stringently attached to this, even personally giving orders himself, it seems as if China, with its 1.5 billion people, is going to continue the lockdowns, the mandatory testing, and the real restrictions and hardships on people's daily lives just to get that pretty much unattainable number of zero COVID in the country, of 1.5 billion people.
Yeah, exactly. And to that point, there have been some new clusters, right? And even talk of some restrictions coming back.
Yeah, so this is affecting several cities in eastern China that started tightening up their COVID-19 rules on Sunday. So you have a county with less than 300 mostly asymptomatic cases, but yet still the whole county now has gone into lockdown. You have a city with just 42 cases, mostly asymptomatic. And you have public venues like shops and supermarkets that are located underground closed. You have dine-in services at restaurants suspended. And the government advising people to work from home for 42 mostly asymptomatic cases. Across the entire mainland, Michael, fewer than 500 cases reported, just today, mostly asymptomatic. And yet these restrictions continue to be in place where people have to wait in hours-long lines to get tested every couple of days. And if they don't have that green QR code, they're not even allowed to do things like go to the hospital to get their parents' medication, which was a situation that created a viral video where a woman confronted police in the border city of Dandong. And so, Michael, zero COVID in China continues to be a real struggle for the people who are actually having to live it. And even President Xi's hermetically sealed closed loop was breached.
It does make you wonder how long the policy can continue. Good to see you, Will. Appreciate that. Will Ripley there in Taipei. Massive flooding in parts of New South Wales, Australia. Why residents are being urged to evacuate and what we can expect in the coming days. We'll have that when we come back.
My name's Pippa Bailey. I work for Ipsos and I'm head of our climate change and sustainability practice. So many companies that we speak to struggle with, how to talk about sustainability, how to share the great campaigns that they're doing. And there's kind of a number of guidelines people need to follow. First of all, making sure you've got your own house in order, that your own environment, social and governance policies are heading in the right direction before you then go kind of on the offensive with a campaign where you want to illustrate what great work you're doing. But also to kind of avoid greenwashing is making sure that that really fits under the brand banner, that it represents what your brand is about, so that it feels very intuitive for consumers, for citizens.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
As the sun sets in Seoul and Shanghai, deals are signed in Dubai, and Europe is already in play. New York prepares to make its first move. I'm Julia Chatterley, host of CNN's First Move. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
Bold moves, big deals, winning trades. It's all right here. Make CNN your first move.
First Move with Julia Chatterley today.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
At least one person has died and thousands are being urged to evacuate in Sydney, Australia, after torrential rain and damaging winds led to flash flooding in some areas on Sunday, and it looks like more bad weather is on the way. A life-threatening emergency. That's how one official in New South Wales describes the rising floodwaters in parts of Australia's biggest city.
We are now facing dangers on multiple fronts. Flash flooding, riverine flooding and coastal erosion.
Thousands of residents were ordered to evacuate parts of Sydney where heavy rain is already hitting, with more expected to come in the next few days. Authorities say the situation is rapidly evolving and urge people to stay off the roads. The State Emergency Service says it has responded to more than 3,000 emergency requests already, and dozens of rescue squads have been dispatched.
The level of the dams, there's no room for the water to remain in the dams. They are starting to spill. The rivers are flowing very fast and very dangerous.
New South Wales gearing up for the deteriorating conditions, the state asking the federal government to send helicopters and troops to help with rescue efforts and sandbagging. Weather experts warn landslides could happen, the landscape already vulnerable because of previous floods in the region. In some areas, emergency crews are even ferrying livestock to drier grounds. The bigger animals like these ponies, an additional challenge for rescue workers.
Feels really good to be able to achieve a rescue and bring everyone back to land safely.
With some parts of Sydney experiencing downpours of more than 200 millimetres, with some places up to 350 millimetres, missions like this, for animals and humans alike, could become more critical in the hours ahead. All right, let's bring in meteorologist Derek Van Dam for more on all of this. I was talking to my sister earlier who's in Sydney, and she said everybody's very nervous about this.
As they should be. And, you know, this is completely taking their livelihoods and flipping it upside down for so many residents of Sydney, especially into the southwestern suburbs. Get this, this is the fourth flooding event in less than 18 months for some of those communities. So you can imagine what this is doing for people. And authorities here are concerned. I mean, you heard it just a moment ago in that package. They're concerned about people driving over flooded roadways, that they don't know the depth of the floodwaters. And you can imagine just how deceiving this particular roadway would be. How deep is that? Is that 1 meter deep? Is it a half meter deep? Is it 4 meters deep? You never know. You take a chance when you approach a flooded roadway like that. So what is happening? This is the water vapor imagery across New South Wales and Queensland, Eastern Australia. Look at that spin in the upper levels of the atmosphere. That is a cutoff low, meaning it is literally cut off from the movement of the atmosphere. There's nothing to push it along. And it doesn't help that the ocean water temperatures right along the coastline of New South Wales running about 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above average. So that is adding fuel to this cutoff low, allowing for that moisture bump and producing significant rainfall totals. In fact, the Bureau of Meteorology from Australia putting out this map, 7-day rainfall totals exceeding 400 millimeters just to the southwest of Sydney. That is impressive. We're talking about 3 to 6 times the monthly average for many of these locations. So let's give you a few examples. Look at Dark's Forest, 402 millimeters just in the past 2 days. That's 48-hour rainfall total. That is impressive rain. That is a lot of rain in a short period of time. And the radar is still extremely active from Sydney to Wollongong, even further south as this cutoff low just kind of meanders. The problem going forward here is yet another cutoff low will form by the second half of this week and continue to push in moisture from the ocean. That warm ocean water and allow for additional rainfall. So how much rain is to come? This is on top of what's already taken place. So you have to put this into context. Let's zoom into the greater Sydney area, and you can see from Newcastle to Wollongong and Sydney, the potential exists for another 150 to 250 millimeters on top of what has already fallen within the next 3 days. So the problems here could get worse before they get better. Michael?
Yeah, soaked ground and more rain, not a good combination. Derek, good to see you, mate. Thanks for that. Derek Van Dam. Well, a search and rescue operation resumed on Sunday for more than 24 crew members after their ship broke in half and sank in the South China Sea on Saturday. CNN's Selena Wang with the story.
Rough seas engulf a sinking ship. A lifeline is dropped from the sky, and a lucky crew member is hoisted to safety. He and 2 of his crewmates now being treated in hospital in Hong Kong. The rescue is just in time as the ship below, an engineering vessel, slips into the choppy sea about 300 kilometers off the coast of Hong Kong. Many of the crew of 30 are still missing, and rescuers fear they may have been swept away after the ship split in two, caught in the powerful winds and waves of Tropical Storm Chaba. Search operations resumed Sunday, looking for survivors. That storm now battering parts of mainland China after making landfall in the province of Guangdong later Saturday. Its fury on land, just as formidable. A tornado associated with its outer bands spun through one city, ripping off roofs and uprooting trees, as seen in this footage from Chinese state media. In China's Hainan province, some residents were evacuated from their homes after heavy rains caused knee-deep floods in some areas. Forecasters say the storm is expected to weaken as it moves inland. Selena Wang, CNN, Beijing.
At least 6 people are dead following an avalanche of ice in northeastern Italy, according to CNN affiliate Sky TG24. The avalanche occurred on the Marmolada Glacier, the highest mountain in the Italian Dolomites. Alpine Rescue Services say a large section of the glacier broke away and came crashing down on a path to the summit. The area is experiencing record heat for this time of year. At least 8 other hikers have been injured and a dozen more reported missing. Rescue efforts continuing. And officials in Egypt are investigating the deaths of 2 women following shark attacks. Both were said to be swimming in the Red Sea when the attacks took place in separate incidents. The second woman, reported to be a Romanian tourist. Onlookers watching in horror as an Austrian woman was attacked on Friday. She died after losing an arm and a leg. Shark attacks have been rare in Egypt's Red Sea in recent years. Still to come here on the program, we meet a Ukrainian civil volunteer who not only looks after and delivers supplies to soldiers, she also takes care of dogs left behind in war zones. We'll be right back.
This is a really important story. My name's Clarissa Ward. I work for CNN.
Assalamu alaikum.
Day in, day out, you see the reality of people living through this.
Ничего страшного.
Okay.
This is the front line.
On a human level, you find courage, sacrifice. This is what life is about.
A lot of people are wondering why.
You see the worst of humanity.
Putin might use a nuclear weapon. Absolutely terrifying.
But you also see the best of humanity. My job is to be present.
The human cost is right here.
And to tell these stories.
We're talking about families.
That is the most important thing.
I'm Clarissa Ward in Ukraine. This
is
CNN.
Tuesday, it's time to celebrate with coast-to-coast fireworks and music from Pitbull, Maren Morris, Machine Gun Kelly, Journey, Gloria Estefan, T-Pain, Old Dominion, the Doobie Brothers, Willie Nelson, and so much more. This 4th in America, join Don Lemon, Dana Bash, Ana Cabrera, and Sarah Seidner. Celebrate the 4th in America. Live Tuesday on CNN.
Ukrainian troops fighting on the front lines know there's always someone who's got their back, with groups of civilian volunteers helping deliver crucial supplies. And along the way, they also give a helping hand to some of man's best friends. Ben Wiedemann with the story.
Yulia and her friends are loading up their armored van. Food, medicine, water for frontline villages. That and protective gear for the troops. Before the war, Yulia was a model and worked in local government. Now she's a volunteer. I didn't consider leaving as an option, she says. Of course, I'm staying in my country to help as much as possible. During a drive back from the front in May, Yulia was badly injured when her truck crashed under shelling. She spent 2 restless months in hospital. They were holding me in hospital, and I told them I have work to do, she recalls. I was coordinating deliveries on the phone. I had no right to sit on my hands. First stop on this day, a military position by the road. All of this has been donated by people in Ukraine. Here, the troops offer a quick appraisal of world leaders.
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson.
What about Biden? Joe Biden. Joe Biden, yes.
Joe Biden. Olaf Scholz.
Scholz. Ще ми не читак, ми нічого не знаємо.
The next stop, a village perilously close to the fighting. They have to hand out the aid as quickly as possible because they don't want people to get together because we're just a few kilometers from Russian lines. Spirits here still buoyant. I stayed because of the animals, Natasha tells me. I'm responsible for all the abandoned animals on this street. More than 50 cats and around 20 dogs. At our final stop, they drop off more supplies for the soldiers and feed stray dogs. They had planned to evacuate a family fleeing from behind Russian lines, but they didn't show up. The soldiers here say overnight there was heavy shelling. Russian drones often on the prowl overhead. My mind tells me I should be afraid, says Yulia, but we can't leave them behind. Them is a dog and 2 litters of puppies, born in the trenches. One of the mother dogs was killed by Russian artillery. The little ones, orphans. Once loaded, we're off to the city of Zaporizhia. We're out of the danger zone. Once we get to the city, they'll take the mother, who's been injured in a blast, to a vet. They found homes for some of these puppies, but not all. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Zaporizhia, southern Ukraine.
And finally this hour, a rather eerie auction for some Gothic goods. An antique, get this, vampire slaying kit has sold in the UK for almost $16,000. It's not much, actually. It's more than 6 times the asking price. You'd think it'd go for more than that. The 19th century box has everything you need to ward off vampires: crucifixes, holy water, a wooden stake, and more. The auction house says the kit once belonged to Lord William Hayley, a British aristocrat with a place in the House of Lords. There was actually a bidding war for the box, with offers coming in from around the world. That's a bargain. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you spending part of your day with me. I'm Michael Holmes. Do stick around. World Sport coming up next. I'll see you in about 15 minutes.
Nothing is ever given to you in life. If you want to be a great businessman, you got to put in the work. And the same applies to survivors of trafficking. My name is Given Kachepa, and I'm now a dentist in Dallas, Texas. I grew up in Zambia. We grew up very poor. I was trafficked into the United States by an organization known as TTT Partners in Education. The mission of the organization was to go to African countries and bring kids to America to sing in churches. We were singing in malls. We were singing in schools. So the ministry had different ways of making revenue, and yet those of us that were singing were not receiving a penny from that. My dental practice is based here in North Dallas. We've been here now 5 years. It's been an exciting, wonderful journey. My goal as a dentist in the future is opening up clinics in Zambia. We have 2 of them that we've built from the ground up. And being a business person today, I just cannot foresee a situation in which I would work somebody without compensating them for the work that they're doing. It's important to me that we all try to get along and make life a little bit easier for each other.
It was the horrifying moment that shook all who watched it at the start of this weekend's British Grand Prix. Of the next-gen prodigies at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships, why, in the end, it was a welcome career first for this young Italian star. CNN World Sport begins right now. Hi there, welcome to CNN World Sport. I'm Patrick Snell. Thanks for joining us tonight. We do start with this weekend's highly dramatic British Grand Prix at Silverstone, where there is so much to get to. Off the top, want to stress it would prove to be a history-defining weekend for Spain's Carlos Sainz, who secures his first ever victory in Formula One. Special moment for him, but we do start with that horrific crash that came right at the beginning of Sunday's race at the iconic racetrack venue. Major injuries, thankfully, with more now from Silverstone. CNN's Amanda Davis now.
A record crowd here at Silverstone today came wanting drama, but not the kind of drama we saw on the opening lap when young Chinese driver Zhou Guanyu skidded off track at the first corner. His car flipped, bounced over this gravel and into the fence. Surely there can be no questions asked anymore about the value of that head protection device, the Halo. Without it, this would have been a very different post-race report. The good news was that Zhou was declared fit and released from the medical centre even before the end of the race. And the 52 laps we got were proper edge-of-the-seat, action-packed stuff, ultimately coming down to a shootout over the final 10 laps. Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz going for it, hammer and tong. In 8 years in Formula One, 150 race starts, Sainz had never before started from pole position. He'd never before won a race, but he stuck his elbows out, he lost the lead, he regained the lead, had his say, and ultimately is now celebrating, finishing on the top step of the podium for the first time. Congratulations. It's been a long time coming. How does that feel?
Thank you, yeah. I knew it would come, it was a matter of time, but this one is definitely came in an even more special manner.
What did you think of over those last 10 laps?
I wanted to end it pretty quickly.
Congratulations. Congratulations, Mattia. How important was that in terms of getting back to winning ways?
Very important, I would say, because after 9 races, 7-2, and there were some races where we were leading and we didn't somehow win at the end of the races. Carlos as well, very pleased for him because I think he well deserved. He made the pole yesterday, he made the victory today.
A lot being made about the decisions you took in terms of your drivers and letting them race. When you look back on that, how important do you think that might be in terms of the championship?
As first, I think we did whatever we could to win today, and there was a time of the race where we asked them to swap positions, which was not obvious, and Carlos did it immediately with no delay. We'll have another opportunity for him.
Title race still on?
Still very long. Mercedes back in the fight. We've seen they have been very fast today. That's another key element, but very pleased that they are back, and hopefully they will take off some points to the Red Bull.
It's a result that sees Carlos move up to 4th in the championship standings and has seen Max Verstappen have his lead at the top cut to 34 points after his 7th place finish. His wait for a British Grand Prix victory goes on, but he has still won 5 of the last 7 races. And up next, it's Austria, Red Bull's home race. Amanda Davis, CNN, Silverstone.
Thanks to Amanda there for the team at Silverstone. Next up, we're off to the All England Club. The very latest from Wimbledon is just ahead as we break down a superb contest this Sunday between two of the sport's biggest and brightest young stars. Stay with us. Back with an emotional and indeed nostalgic weekend at the Wimbledon Tennis Championships in England. The famed All England Club marking 100 years of its iconic centre court. A plethora of stars and legends of the sport gracing the occasion with their presence. A musical celebration too. A parade of former champs with so much of the focus, of course, on 8-time men's champ Roger Federer. Not playing this year, remember, due to a knee injury. A superb contest playing out earlier Sunday between two of the sport's biggest and brightest young stars. Italy's Jannik Sinner in the end proving too good for teenage Spaniard Carlos Alcaraz, who was seeded 5. The 20-year-old Sinner winning the first 2 sets, but Alcaraz winning the third on a really close-fought tiebreaker before the 10th-seeded Italian closes out the match, victory in 4 sets for him. Now, Sinner, who needed 6 match points before finally putting his opponent away, looking good and looking menacing through to the last 8 at Wimbledon for the very first time in his career. Joined now by CNN Sports contributor Ben Rothenberg, who's at Wimbledon for us. Ben, thanks for joining us. You tweeted earlier Sinner had never won a tour-level grass court match before his first-round victory over Stan Wawrinka. You see, I do follow you on social media. Now he's into the last 8. How dangerous is an opponent do you think he really is now? How dangerous has he become at this year's Wimbledon?
Well, he's definitely had a lot of potential. Ever since I first saw him in 2019, I could tell he had a lot of raw gifts and tremendous power. And he didn't play juniors or anything, traditional sort of tennis ladder. He built himself up through minor pro tournaments in Italy and really has come into his own. There were some questions about his sort of durability and endurance in some matches, especially best-of-5 format at Grand Slams. So I think maybe in some ways the grass could wind up being one of his best surfaces, which keeps matches shorter, keeps points shorter, and he looked incredibly impressive today against Carlos Alcaraz, who's gotten a lot more talk as far as young players go this year, winning 2 Masters events. But Sinner really took it to him from the very beginning. And then after letting the 3rd set slip in fairly heartbreaking fashion, Sinner came back and won the 4th pretty impressively. So good mental fortitude there from Jannik Sinner, who's definitely a name to remember for people who haven't seen him yet on tour.
Yeah, he is one impressive young talent, no question about that. Over the weekend, we were royally entertained by the Australian Nick Kyrgios. He's through. He reached the last 16 after winning a feisty encounter with the young Greek player Stefanos Tsitsipas. Kyrgios plays the young American